This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today is our May edition of Incentives and Instincts, a recurring series in which I speak with economist and friend Bryce Ward about some of the broader challenges facing our society. Bryce, how are you today?
I'm hanging in there, Justin.
Hanging in there, doing what you can?
Doing what I can. It's spring, which
Yeah.
is obviously a great time here in Missoula.
It is peak Missoula right now.
Yeah. I don't know. Are you aware that there's a bunch of owls in the tree outside your house?
I am quite aware of these owls. And I'm reminded every day when I come home and there's a flock of people pointing at the owls and telling me to slow down because my car might hurt the owls that are 30 feet up a tree.
Well, sometimes they fall out of the tree. That happened in my neighborhood a few years ago.
Yeah, the owls have been now bringing rabbits into the nest, which is awesome because there's a lot of rabbits. And my dog chases them and causes some chaos. So today we're going to talk about time. We're calling this episode Time Value of Time. It's unclear what exactly that means, but time is a recurring theme in our conversations. I think it goes back to when we first met each other. You do a lot of work with the American Time Use Survey. We'll reference that today. Wonder if time is our limiting factor or if it's actually energy. But I think about time and I talk about it with students in the sense that it's really the scarce resource. We teach time value of money and compounding and a lot of these concepts around money, but time works differently. Let's just start there. How do you think about time in this sense as an economist?
Time is finite.
Yeah.
So it is very easy to then get your economist brain into because it's scarce. Anything that's scarce, now you're into the world of opportunity costs. Mm-hmm. Every choice you make with respect to time is foregoing or foreclosing some other opportunities that you could do with that time.
Yeah.
People understand that money is finite, particularly when you're young and you have very little of it. But, so you understand that if I buy this, I can't buy that. You're making choices on time literally every second.
Yeah.
You're only making choices with money when you're buying something, which for me at least, I don't buy stuff that often. Right? There's the shopping trip on the weekends and every once in a while you need to replace something. I'm not actually making daily choices about buying things.
Sure. Although you're making daily choices about how you allocate the money you have.
Or, and then there's certain things I'm consuming on a daily basis, which I guess I paid for a long time ago, like my house or my car or the durables that I have. But in terms of literally just sitting there doing a calculation of, if I do this, I'm not going to do that. We do that with time literally every day. So it is the most front of mind thing that we are aware of.
So let's take a moment to define time value of money as this framework and compounding the notion that $1 today is always preferable to $1 tomorrow. Why is that?
In general, I know what I can do with $1 today. I don't know what I might do with $1 tomorrow because I might not even be here.
And that dollar might not be given to you tomorrow.
That's right. So discounting is basically a way of capturing the fact that the future is uncertain and the present is certain. So when there's uncertainty or risk or something, I need more tomorrow to be indifferent between today and tomorrow.
Sure. And so in business, we do this process called discounting, as you mentioned a moment ago. We take future cash flows and we discount them to present value. And that's one of the frameworks we use to make decisions about how we allocate money in the present. And also the flip side of that calculation is compound interest. And that's why putting money in the bank, you can make money and then you can make money on the money that you've made from the interest and the snowball rolls down the hill and it's a good thing and it allows us to retire if we plan properly, all those things that we learn in business. But we never really learn frameworks for allocating time. Does time compound in a similar way to money? Is that even a useful way to think about it?
Oh, yeah. That's path dependence.
Okay. Right? Explain path dependence.
Path dependence is the notion that where I am today is a function of a bunch of decisions and things that happened in the past.
Okay.
And there are forks in the road, so to speak,
Yes.
I guess is the metaphor that we use, is I got to this point. I made the decision to allocate time in this way, and that set me on a different path than if I had allocated it that way. So in that sense, time compounds. We invest time, right? So there is an investment component, right? So the easiest way to think about it is I went to school. I made a choice. I invested a bunch of time in school, and that bettered me. And now I'm in a different situation, and I'm reaping returns to those benefits, right? It's the same thing. The benefits of college education, they compound. That is not just like I get a boost right when I get out of college, and then I'm just the same. No, I am now fundamentally different. I'm in a different place.
But that's how you use your time. Time in itself, it is the ultimate perishable good in the sense that you can save time in that you find a faster route to where you're trying to drive, or you catch the green light or whatever, and that saves you some time in getting to work, and that frees up a few moments to prepare for the podcast that you didn't prepare for, whatever the case may be. But you can't actually save time, set it aside. And if you could, it does not accrue value in the same way that a savings account with money does.
No, yes, that's right. So time itself is ephemeral.
Yeah.
There is only this moment, and that moment's gone.
Yeah.
So there's only what I do with the time.
Sure. How you invest.
And so that's how time compounds, is that you're right. So the time itself does not compound. I cannot create more time by saving time.
But the spending of the time is similar to money in the sense that money can compound as a function of how you invest it. The value of time compounds similarly. If I invest in exercise, chances are I'm going to have a longer, healthier life. That's a good predictor of longevity. Similarly, education, as you mentioned a moment ago, you put the time into an education, presumably it pays dividends in the long run.
So the only way to create time at the individual level is to live longer.
Yeah.
That is the only way that you will add more seconds to your life.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else actually adds seconds. Now, when we talk about saving time, a lot of times what we're doing is we're talking about I'm eliminating some uses of time to free it up for other things.
Yes.
So that's how I, quote unquote, create time.
Right.
Is by figuring out how to not do certain things, or figuring out a more efficient way to achieve the same outcome. But all that does is, all that really is a reallocation of existing time.
And do we know much about how people make decisions with time versus how they make decisions with money, things like that?
The standard economic framework gets the big picture right.
Okay.
Right? So people are trading off activities. And in the simplest model, we talk about labor and leisure, right? So I'm trading off how much time to work versus how much time to not work.
Okay.
Right? And usually we say, well, in that simple model, as if whatever you value the leisure time at is worth more than your wage, then you're going to do leisure. And if the wage is more valuable, you'll do work.
But it still converts that time to money.
It does.
And that's the economist way.
The other way to think about it is actually the money is just the intermediary.
Okay.
Right? The more complicated model, the Becker model, says that I'm allocating time actually between three things: work, household production, and leisure.
Okay.
And work is just a means of producing money, which produces something else, which we call utility in economics. So it's really, fundamentally, this is about enjoyment.
Yeah.
Utility, benefit. That's actually what we're trading off. We're basically saying, look, this time is, I go to work, and there's whatever intrinsic value I get from work, but then I get this money thing. And then I'm weighing that against whatever intrinsic value I assign to other activities. The question I think you're asking, going back to the original question that we started on this road, is, are we good at weighing those benefits? I think is the real question. Do we have a real understanding of how our allocation of time affects our well-being in such a way that allows us to make highly optimized trade-offs about it? And that's hard. I think there's lots of times when our current selves look at our past selves and are very critical of how our past selves chose to allocate their time.
Sure.
And therefore, it is assumed that, maybe our past selves were irrational or whatever it is. But our current selves are not facing the same exact constraints that our past selves were.
Yeah, and this age factor is really interesting in the sense that a few moments ago you said to a young person, the salience of the scarcity of money is high, right? Because you've had less of an opportunity to accrue it, and you probably demand a lower wage rate, all these things. Like money is scarce as a young person. Time is abundant, or you have the perception that time is abundant. As you age, you don't necessarily feel abundance with money. Maybe if you have the good fortune to, that's great, but you don't feel the abundance of time in the way. Part of that is longevity, but part of it is just like life gets more complicated and demanding, and like we enter into the youth sports industrial complex that we talked about months ago. But all those things. So it is this kind of inverse perception issue with money and time.
Yeah. So again, that's that horizon issue, right?
Yeah.
So like I have 24 hours in a day. There's daily time pressure. Then there's this macro time pressure, lifetime time pressure. And that's where, every day you get older, your expected time is, unless science is extending it faster than you're aging, part of where it becomes interesting to think about time is that you mentioned this earlier, right? Which is that a lot of times time isn't really the constraint in terms of what I want to do. Is because there's very few activities that are simply the allocation of time. Most of the time, it is the combination of I'm going to do time, maybe some money, and then capacity, effort, attention, motivation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to merge all of these things together to produce the outcome that I'm interested in producing.
Right.
And when you look at time diary data, one of the things that pops out is people spend a lot of time watching television.
Sure.
And now it's a lot of time watching television and
phone screens
and all this kind of stuff. And so it's hard to look at all that and be like, you didn't have time to do these things.
Sure. Yeah. 4 hours spent on a screen. You're like, maybe you did have some time to exercise or clean the house or do whatever you needed to do.
The constraint more often is I didn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah, it's energy.
I didn't have the capacity to, yes, I wanted to go exercise, but that requires some degree of willpower, and I have to do it, and I have to be able to get over my fear that I'm going to end up even more tired afterwards. And
some of these things I feel like just the way we're framing this has a little bit of judgment that maybe is unfair.
Oh, no, look, listen, these are capacity constraints.
Right.
This is, in some sense, this is the really interesting thing.
Yes.
Right? It's not actually time. Most people have time in their day to do other things. That's then the question, which is what is the actual constraint that's shaping my choices? Because the constraint that's shaping my choices far more often is bandwidth. I don't have the bandwidth, right? Now, sometimes that's physical, right? I have actual physical impairments that limit what I can do or limit my capacity to do things.
Mm-hmm.
But other times it's just like some of this is maybe innate. Some of this has to do with how you've invested your time over many years, right? How healthy are you?
What kind of job do you have?
What kind of habits have you cultivated? Like sleep, right?
We'll be back to my conversation with Bryce Ward after this short break. A New Angle is proudly presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. This show does not happen without these pillars of our community, and I'm so grateful for their support and encouragement. And speaking of support, have you checked out our new website yet? anewanglepodcast.com. There you can support our show directly with a variety of subscription options. Subscribers get access to bonus episodes, additional segments, writings, and other benefits. So check it out at anewanglepodcast.com.
Hey, this is Mark Moss from Tell Us Something, and you're listening to A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm here with Bryce Ward, discussing time and how we make choices with it.
So sleep is necessary for regenerating bandwidth. How much do you need? How much can you get by? We know that there are long, intermediate term trade-offs, right? I can sleep less, but I will suffer for it in various ways.
Yeah.
And this is where the economic framework is less developed, right? Because it's less observable.
Sure.
So I can observe the production function of a factory, but the production function of your bandwidth it's idiosyncratic. I'm sure there are certain patterns to it.
Yeah.
But like, it's not every human operates on the same exact. If I eat these foods and I sleep this amount, I will have this much bandwidth. It doesn't work like that.
And even at the individual level, it doesn't work that way. When I was younger, I used to think if I sleep this much and eat these foods, I will feel this way. And that
I got older.
And it's just like, wow.
The technology keeps changing.
Exactly.
Right? Like, but it really is the constraint.
Yeah.
Sometimes time is a constraint. Sometimes you literally just don't have enough time to get through the actual things that you want to get done. The reason that things didn't get done, people say they didn't have time, but it's they didn't have bandwidth. And that's the other part of this, right? The other part that makes this so hard from a model perspective, right, is so normally when we teach choice, right, we use the budget constraint. We say, oh, you have a budget constraint, and here's the price of this thing, and so the price of good X is this, and the price of good Y is that, and I can allocate my my Z dollars between X and Y. And so, I'm going to rate the relative price of X and Y and against my preferences, and we'll figure it out.
Sure.
Right, but when it comes to effort prices, bandwidth prices, that's the other thing that's highly idiosyncratic. In fact, it's one of the most interesting things about humans, right, is there are tasks which, for me, the effort price is so high that a lot of other people would look at it and be like, that's trivial. That's 5 minutes. Just bang it out.
Sure. And we've talked about this in the context of social capital, right? For somebody who has more introverted disposition, the effort it takes to enter into a social engagement is really high. Whereas other people that like maybe actually builds capacity.
Right. So yeah, that's the classic example, right? So introvert in highly stimulative environment gets drained.
Yeah.
Extrovert in a stimulative environment comes out with more. But there's lots of other things, and a lot of these are just our weird, quirky, idiosyncratic anxieties, all these kind of things.
So this reminds me of a lesson I learned during high school. So I played 3 sports in high school. And so that meant there was little time of the year where I didn't have a sport going on. And those were the times where I was least productive as a student. That gap in the fall between soccer and basketball, I had a hard time motivating for much. That gap in the spring between basketball and tennis, I really had a hard time motivating. But when I was in season, I learned that like when time is scarce, I actually perform better. And it led me down this path of trying to optimize and squeeze tasks into small spaces. And we'll get to the outcome of that I've realized later in life in a moment. But like, how do you sort of view that contradiction between like, I can't get things done when I have a lot of time?
So this is the importance of constraints. As an economist, you're trained to think, if I relax constraints, people are better off, right? In a kind of a very simple mathematical, theoretical world, that is true. But I think as we've talked about on here at several points, right? So one of the problems of affluence and relative abundance is when you relax some constraints, people become worse off, right? And this is one of the really important things when it comes to time and effort is a lot of times the constraint is good for me. Right? And you'll hear artists talk about this, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
writers
absolutely.
talk about this. Oh, I mean, like in TV shows, right? So like a writer wants to write movies or books completely free, right? But then writing in an old 80s style television show where it had to be 22 minutes and 17 seconds or whatever it was, putting you into the box actually helps you.
Yes.
It's just a different version of the stress adapt cycle, right? Which is you had adapted muscles for allocating time when under stress. Took the stress away, and you were suddenly not adapted for it. And that's just a microcosm of a lot of our struggles with food in an affluent world, our struggles with information in an information age, our struggles with anybody, alcohol, drugs, we've talked about these in past episodes, right? Is what happens when I can get what I want, but it's not what I need?
Yeah.
And that need, and that's what's so hard, right? Is because we sit there and we say, oh, this is bad. We should reimpose the constraints. The problem is that not everybody needs the same constraint. Each of us needs a different level of stress to optimize our adaptation at a given point in time.
And you can see it in your kids, right? You get toward the end of the summer and like it feels like things are going off the rails. And I hate to say this in May, as a lot of parents and kids are approaching the end of the school year and thinking of all the wonderful things that are going to happen. But fast forward to August and
is coming.
It's like, why are things off the rails? And it is, we need some structure. We need to reimpose some constraints and get back to some sense of normal in a way.
Yeah, I think the reality is that, I won't say every human, but many humans operate better in a world of constraint.
Yeah.
And it is the challenge that we face as we progress economically and we create more prosperity and opportunity is how do we keep the right level of constraint for us?
Yeah.
And I don't think it works to make that an individual choice.
Yeah.
Individuals left to their own devices, it seems like there is a minority for whom that is fully liberating and they are fully capable of self-regulating into some sort of at least seeming optimum.
Sure.
But most people struggle in some area.
Yeah.
The dopamine process catches you somewhere.
There's so many ways to interrupt it now, too.
Yeah.
The addiction industrial complex. Given all that we've talked about in our remaining time, I'd love to hear how you make choices about time in your life.
I try and keep my choices with respect to time very simple.
Okay.
I don't want to make a ton of choices with respect to
Yeah.
time. I think that's my default, right? Part of that is because, if I'm being really honest, like I don't have a lot of control over a lot of my discretionary time. So there's work that has to get done. So I'm locked in with, I've agreed to do these things. And why did I agree to do them? Because they pay me money. And at this point in time, stashing away money seems important because I don't want to keep doing this forever.
Yes. Because money does compound.
Yes.
We know that.
Yes. I'm like, I want more money now so that it has more time to compound. A lot of what I do with respect to time, there's the period of the day that is for working. I am older now that I do try and maintain the period of the day that is for exercising because I know that if it goes wrong, and it's hard to get back on.
Yep.
There's the period of the day that is for domestic production. And this is where I deviate from some economists, right? So a lot of economists would look at my allocation towards domestic production and they view that as an inefficiency.
Right, because you could bill out more hours to a client, make more money, pay somebody to make
I
your
should
meals.
be paying somebody to do this.
Yeah.
And if I don't have kids that are present, then maybe I will do more of that. But with kids present, I do feel like there's some expectation setting for them that this is what life entails.
Yeah, this is what a family is.
And you need to be doing that.
Sure.
And then the other thing is that if I don't have somebody else doing it, I'm more likely to get annoyed and make them do it.
Yep.
And that is also useful for them,
Sure.
right? Like, it's just the stress of having to do something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And being able to learn, yes, I can get over this. But there's also skill, right? You're going to have to do this, right? There's going to be a period in your life, unless you're really lucky, where you're not going to be able to pay somebody to do this. So you should have some basic domestic skills. Yeah, if I wasn't doing it myself, I don't think I would get annoyed and be like, why am I doing this?
Right.
You guys do the dishes, right? You guys sweep the floor. You guys mop. You guys vacuum. You guys wash windows, whatever it is. And so I think, so that to me, is, again, it's that there's other compounding values.
Sure.
So, and then, at some point you run out of capacity and you turn on the NBA playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. Which are fun right now.
Oh, they've been amazing this year.
Just a couple of parting shots and how I use time or think about time. Like I said a few moments ago, I used to really be into optimization. Like I was the one kid in college that would do a little studying between Seinfeld and Friends, and during that half-hour show that NBC would stick in there to keep an audience engaged. Yeah, I would get homework done during that time, and I've always sort of operated that way. And I think it paid a lot of dividends. But as I've aged, I've learned that focus on optimization has detracted from being present. And I've tried in recent years to really be deliberate about transitions and I brought in a 2-minute coherence breathing exercise into my classes. We start the class with 2 minutes of breathing. Yeah, you've come to visit and experience that, and it just feels like the class is more spacious and takes longer, and I can do more in it. So it's a strange exercise, and I'm investing time in some idleness, and it feels like the return on that investment is a sensation of more time. Don't quite know how it works, but it seems like it's a nice balance for the moment.
I think that's right. We do not experience time like a clock.
Exactly.
The classic example that, is why does the drive back feel shorter than the drive there?
Yeah, exactly. Why does the rest interval feel a lot shorter than the work interval?
Yeah. And so I think you're absolutely right that there are ways that you can, for lack of a better term, trick your brain.
Yeah.
Right? Into perceiving time differently, and then that changing of the perception of time actually affects the enjoyment or the return to that time. Mm-hmm. So I tried for actually a long time to think about how would you write a paper on this, like bandwidth constraint kind of stuff, right? And you end up with this: I have to have a production function, that's weird, and I have to have prices, and that's weird, right? Because the price of, I can tell you how many minutes it takes, right? But I can't tell you how many effort units it consumes.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I can't do that is because I can change my perception of the effort unit.
Oh, completely. And I guess for me, one of the things I try hard to do is set myself up for flow state. And that's a sort of a fool's errand in many ways, but there are some things. If I'm working on a paper and an idea and I get this moment of flow state that's uninterrupted and 3 hours of writing, I can do more than I was able to do in the previous 3 weeks of chipping away at this thing.
Flow states. Yeah, exactly. What is flow? Why? How do I get to flow state? Because if I can get to flow state, then those minutes are worth way more than the same minutes trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But obviously, how do you get into flow state is a whole subject in itself.
It is. That's a whole nother series of radio shows. Yeah. Well, Bryce, I think we might be out of time. And we'll say thank you, listeners, because this is a half-hour block of your time that you can't get back. You paid for this with your life, quite literally. Okay, time for this month's listener question. It's a follow-up to last month's take on tariffs. I love that listeners are holding us accountable. This question was submitted anonymously via email and is voiced by our very own Maddie Jordan.
Effectively, Bryce argued that tariffs aren't the solution because the economy is not the problem. But there are clearly problems that underlie the support for tariffs. So what are the actual problems and what are the solutions?
Okay, so there's two versions. There's many versions of what tariffs are.
Two versions, one from each of Peter Navarro's personalities.
And then there's the Scott Bessent version, and then there's the Trump version. Yeah. So there's a bunch of versions. So I'm going to skip over that somehow trade deficits are bad, because trade deficits are not bad.
Let's set that one aside. Okay.
The thing that I think has the most that you see is there's globalization was bad, and we need to have more manufacturing and make more stuff here, and that'll solve this working class problem, blah, blah, blah. There's this notion that people used to be better off than they are now because they could work in a factory job.
That's all the time we have for this episode. If you'd like to hear more of this conversation and receive other exclusive content, please consider a paid subscription. Thanks for listening to A New Angle. If you like what we do and want to support us directly, please consider a subscription at anewanglepodcast.com. A New Angle is recorded at Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. Our presenting sponsors are First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Kelly Larson is our producer. Maddie Jordan is our production assistant. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. And Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.